The massive warship called Inevitable Victory dropped out of hyperspace above a small blue planet. And Supreme Commander Desix Vorn stood at the observation deck with his 4 arms crossed behind his back. He looked down at the world below with the same bored expression he had worn for the last 1,000 conquests. And his gray scales reflected the light of the yellow star that warmed this unremarkable solar system. "What do we have here?" he asked his tactical officer without much interest. The officer, a younger Varathi named Kesix, pulled up the holographic display and began reading the probe data that their scouts had collected over the past cycle. Supreme Commander, the 3rd planet of this system contains approximately 8 billion intelligent life forms. Kesix reported. They call themselves humans, and they have only recently developed space travel of the most basic kind. Desix let out a sound that was something between a laugh and a growl. Recently developed space travel? He repeated with amusement clear in his voice. "Show me their capabilities." The holographic display shifted to show images of human technology, and Desix felt his amusement grow with each passing second. Their spacecraft were powered by chemical rockets that burned primitive fuels, and their weapons used small metal projectiles pushed by explosive powder. They had not discovered zero-point energy or plasma technology or gravity manipulation. And their most advanced space station was a tiny metal box that floated just above their atmosphere. "They have nuclear weapons," Kesix added, trying to find something noteworthy in the data. "Nuclear weapons." Desix laughed out loud this time, and several other officers on the bridge joined him. Species stopped using nuclear weapons 50,000 years ago because they are too dangerous to the user. What kind of creatures would threaten to destroy themselves just to harm an enemy? He shook his head and turned back to the observation window. The Varathi Dominion had conquered over 4,000 worlds across 12 galaxies, and they had perfected the art of subjugation over millions of years. They had defeated species with psychic abilities and species with natural armor stronger than steel, and species that could survive in the vacuum of space. But this world with its soft and fragile inhabitants would require nothing more than standard protocol classification. Desix asked. The tactical AI responded in its calm, mechanical voice. "Primitive species classification confirmed. Threat level, minimal. Recommended approach, standard subjugation. Protocol with expected resistance duration of 2 to 3 planetary rotations. 2 to 3 days, Desix thought to himself. This might be their fastest conquest yet. Prepare the invasion force, he commanded. 40,000 drop pods should be more than enough. Target their largest population centers and government buildings. I want their leaders captured and their military neutralized within the first rotation." The bridge erupted into activity as officers relayed orders throughout the fleet. And within hours, the invasion force was ready. Desix watched from his command chair as 40,000 drop pods screamed down through the planet's atmosphere like burning meteors. And he felt nothing but confidence in the inevitable outcome. The pods landed across the globe in cities the humans called New York and London and Tokyo and Moscow and Beijing and hundreds of other population centers. And Varathi soldiers poured out with plasma rifles, ready and shields activated. The initial reports came back exactly as expected. Human military forces engaged, but were quickly overwhelmed by superior Varathi technology. And civilian populations fled in panic through streets filled with smoke and fire. Desix smiled and prepared to record his victory message to High Command, but then something strange happened in a city called Kyiv. A squad of 12 Varathi soldiers was patrolling through the ruins of what had been a residential area when one of them simply vanished. The squad leader reported that Private Vexus had been walking at the rear of the formation. When they heard a short scream, and then nothing. And when they turned around, he was gone. They searched for an hour, but found no body and no trace of what had happened. and Essex dismissed it as an isolated incident caused by some structural collapse or wild animal. But then more reports came in a place called Afghanistan. An entire squad was wiped out by explosives hidden beneath the road they were traveling on. And the humans who planted those explosives were never seen before or after the attacking a dense jungle called the Amazon. Varathi soldiers began disappearing one by one until a company of 200 had been reduced to 30. Traumatized survivors who spoke of shadows that moved and struck without warning in a frozen land called Siberia. Human fighters dressed in white emerged from snowbanks that the Varathi thermal sensors had shown to be empty, killed their targets with silent weapons, and vanished back into the frozen wilderness before anyone could respond. Essex studied these reports with growing confusion because this was not how primitive species were supposed to behave when the Varathi invaded a world. The natives either surrendered quickly or mounted a desperate and disorganized resistance that was crushed within days. But these humans were doing neither. They were not surrendering, and their resistance was anything but disorganized in cities around the world. Human fighters melted into civilian populations and struck at Varathi forces without warning before disappearing again. And the invaders found it impossible to tell which humans were fighters and which were not. "Sir," Essex said with obvious concern in his voice, "we have lost 400 soldiers in the first 12 hours. That is 10 times our projected casualty rate." Essex felt the first tiny seed of doubt plant itself in his mind, but he pushed it away. "They are fighting harder than expected," he admitted, "but they cannot win. Increase the pressure, and they will break like all the others." But as the hours passed and the casualty reports continued to climb, Essex noticed something that disturbed him more than the losses themselves. The humans were not panicking across the planet. In bunkers and military bases and government buildings, human leaders from nations that had been enemies for centuries were sitting down together and making plans. They were sharing intelligence and coordinating attacks and combining their forces with a speed and efficiency that should have been impossible for such a divided species. In one of these bunkers, a human general looked at a map covered with markers showing Varathi positions and spoke words that would later become famous across the galaxy. "These aliens think they've invaded a primitive world full of easy targets," she said to the assembled leaders. "They have no idea that they have just landed on the most dangerous planet in the universe. We've been preparing for this moment our entire existence. Every war we have ever fought was just practice." The other leaders nodded in agreement, and for the first time in human history, every nation on Earth was united by a single purpose. The aliens had picked the wrong planet, and humanity was about to teach them why. 72 hours had passed since the invasion began, and Supreme Commander Essex Vorn no longer felt bored. He stood in the command center of his flagship and stared at the holographic display showing casualty reports from across the planet, and the numbers made no sense to him. 2,000 Varathi soldiers were dead. 2,000 of the finest warriors in 12 galaxies had been killed by creatures who fought with metal projectiles and explosive chemicals. And Essex could not understand how this was possible. "Explain this to me," he demanded, pointing at a report from a region called Texas. Essex pulled up the details with shaking hands and began to read. A single human male engaged a patrol of 15 soldiers, using a long-range projectile weapon called rifle and a cutting tool called a chainsaw, he said. The human killed 9 soldiers before he was neutralized. "One human killed 9 of our soldiers?" Essex repeated in disbelief. "Yes, Supreme Commander. And this type of incident is happening everywhere." The display shifted to show dozens of similar reports in a country called Finland. An entire battalion of 500 soldiers had entered a forest and never come out. And the few survivors who escaped spoke of enemies they never saw who struck from impossible distances in a city called Seoul. A group of young humans who were apparently still children had managed to hack into Varathi communication networks using primitive computing devices, and they had been feeding false information to invasion forces for 2 days in a place called the Australian Outback. Human fighters were using the harsh environment itself as a chaos weapon by leading Varathi patrols into deadly terrain where the heat and lack of water killed more soldiers than the humans. Scifistories felt something he had not experienced. In centuries of warfare, he felt afraid. "Bring me a prisoner," he ordered. "I want to interrogate one of these creatures myself." An hour later, 2 guards dragged a human into the command center and threw her onto the floor in front of. HFY was small by Varathi standards, barely reaching his chest, and her body looked soft and fragile beneath her torn uniform. But her eyes were what caught his attention. There was no fear in those eyes. She looked up at him with cold calculation, like a predator sizing up its prey. And HFY felt deeply uncomfortable under her gaze. "You will tell me about your military strategy," he commanded. "How are you coordinating your attacks, and who is leading your resistance?" The human laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a desperate laugh, but a genuine sound of amusement. And HFY felt his scales flush with anger. "You really do not understand what is happening here, do you?" The human said, and her voice was calm and steady despite her situation. "Explain yourself." HFY demanded. The human slowly stood up, ignoring the guards who moved to stop her. And she looked directly into HFY's eyes. "You came to our planet expecting to find primitive creatures who would surrender at the first sign of superior force," she said. "But you made a terrible mistake in your calculations." "What mistake?" "You forgot to check our history," she said with a cold smile. "We have been killing each other for 200,000 years. We have fought wars that lasted decades and killed millions of our own kind. We have developed thousands of ways to destroy and torture and break each other. And we have become very, very good at it." HFY said nothing because he was beginning to understand. "Your invasion is not the worst thing that has ever happened to us." The human continued. "It is not even close. We have survived ice ages and plagues and famines and world wars. We have dropped nuclear bombs on our own cities just to end a single conflict. You think your plasma rifles scare us?" She laughed again. "We have been preparing for you our entire existence, and we did not even know it. Every war we have ever fought taught us something new about survival and resistance and victory. You are not our first apocalypse, and you are not even our scariest Tuesday." HFY turned to his science officer. "I want a complete analysis of this species," he ordered. "Everything. Their biology, their history, their psychology, everything." The analysis took 3 hours. And when the science officer presented the findings, the entire command staff fell silent. Humans are what is known as persistence predators, the science officer explained, his voice shaking. "This is an evolutionary classification so rare that most xenobiologists consider it mythological." "What does it mean?" HFY asked. "It means they evolved to hunt by chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion," the science officer said. "They cannot run as fast as many Earth creatures, but they can run for hours and days without stopping. They simply follow their prey until it dies from exhaustion." The display showed images of ancient humans hunting across vast plains, following animals that could easily outrun them in short bursts but could not escape the relentless pursuit. "Their entire biology is designed for endurance," the science officer continued. "They heal from injuries that would kill most species. They can survive extreme temperatures and long periods without food or water. They can function with damaged limbs and organs that should render them immobile." "And their psychology?" The science officer hesitated. "They enjoy it," he finally said. Their brains release pleasure chemicals during pursuit and conflict. They find satisfaction in the hunt. They become more dangerous when they are wounded or cornered. Not less. Essex felt the fear grow stronger in his chest. He had conquered 4,000 worlds. And he had never encountered a species designed by evolution to be the perfect warrior. There is more, the science officer said, pulling up an ancient file from the Galactic archives. A species called the Kethrani encountered humans 10,000 years ago. They filed a single report before they went extinct. The file opened to reveal a simple message. The Deathworlders of Sol 3. Do not engage. Do not contact. Do not provoke. Quarantine recommended. They are not primitive. They are contained. Do not open the cage. Essex read the message 3 times. The cage. He looked down at the planet below and finally understood what he had done. Earth was not a primitive world waiting to be conquered. Earth was a prison designed to contain the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. And his invasion had just unlocked the door that night, as if to confirm his fears. The first Varathi command post was completely destroyed by an explosion. The weapon used was made from farming chemicals that any human could buy at a local store, and it was delivered by an elderly human male who operated something called a postal service. He had smiled and waved at the guards before his vehicle exploded. The humans were not afraid to die. They were not afraid of anything, and Essex finally understood why the Galactic Archives had recommended quarantine. Some cages existed for very good reasons. 2 weeks after the invasion began, Supreme Commander Essex Vorn received a message from Varathi High Command that he had never expected to receive. They were asking why he had stopped advancing in the entire history of the Dominion. No invasion force had ever stopped advancing before total victory. But Essex had ordered his troops to dig in and fortify their positions. 3 days ago, he could not explain to High Command that his soldiers were now afraid to leave their bases. The humans had changed everything. Show me the latest tactical report, Essex ordered. And his voice sounded tired even to his own ears. Essex brought up the display. And the situation was even worse than yesterday. Human forces had pushed Varathi troops out of 17 major cities in the past week. And the methods they used were unlike anything in Dominion records in a place called Detroit. Factory workers had converted their manufacturing plants to produce weapons overnight. And they were now building copies of Varathi plasma rifles using materials that should not have been able to handle such technology. They reverse-engineered our weapons in 11 days, Essex said with disbelief clear in his voice. Our scientists said it should be impossible without understanding zero-point energy. But the humans did not care what should be impossible. The display showed images of human fighters carrying plasma weapons mounted on primitive wheeled vehicles they called technicals. And these improvised war machines were devastating Varathi patrols across 3 continents. It gets worse, Essex continued. They captured one of our dropships intact. Essex felt hope for a moment. Have they tried to study it? He asked, thinking that perhaps they could track the ship and recover it. No, Supreme Commander, Essex replied. They flew it directly into our main fuel depot at maximum speed. They crashed it? Yes, with the pilots still at the controls. The display showed security footage from the depot. And Essex watched as the human pilot guided the captured ship toward the massive fuel storage tanks. He could see the pilot's face through the cockpit window. And the human was smiling and laughing as the ship accelerated toward certain death. The explosion had destroyed 3 months of fuel supplies and killed 200 Varathi personnel. Why would they do this? Essex asked, but he already knew the answer. The humans did not think like other species. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for victory. And they seemed to find joy in the destruction of their enemies, even when it cost them their own lives. I want a psychological analysis of this species, he ordered. Study their culture, their entertainment, their history. I want to understand how they think. The analysis took 2 days, and when the results came back, Essex called an emergency meeting of his entire command staff. What you are about to see may disturb you, he warned them. But you need to understand what we are fighting against. The display showed examples of human entertainment movies, where humans fought against alien invasions and won through courage and sacrifice. Video games where human players practiced combat and survival against impossible odds. Books filled with stories of underdogs defeating powerful enemies. Through cleverness and determination, they trained for war as entertainment. The psychological officer explained, his voice barely steady. Their entire culture is built around the glorification of conflict and survival. They've been simulating our invasion for generations. The display shifted to show human history. Thousands of years of wars fought for religion and resources and power and ideas, weapons that grew more destructive with each generation. From swords to cannons to bombs that could destroy entire cities, humans killing humans by the millions, and somehow surviving and growing stronger with each conflict. They do not avoid war like other species, the officer continued. They embrace it. Their greatest heroes are warriors, and their most celebrated moments are battles. They have turned the art of killing into something they are proud of. One image caught Esex's attention. It was a quote from a human philosopher named Nietzsche. He who fights monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster, the quote read. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. They wrote this as a warning to themselves, the officer explained. They are aware of what they are capable of becoming, and they struggle to control it. Essex felt cold fear wash over him. The humans knew they were monsters. They had always known, and now his invasion had given them permission to stop pretending otherwise. The next report confirmed his worst fears. A Varathi scout ship had attempted to escape Earth's orbit to warn the Dominion about what was happening, but it never made it past the planet's moon. The humans had shot it down with a nuclear missile. They used nuclear weapons in space, Essex said, struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. Yes, Supreme Commander. And our intelligence suggests they have thousands more. The display showed the locations of nuclear arsenals around the planet, and there were enough weapons to destroy Earth several times over. These weapons were not built to defend against external threats, Essex said quietly. They were built to use against each other. Essex stared at the display for a long time. He had conquered 4,000 worlds, and he had never encountered a species that was more dangerous to itself than to any external enemy. The humans had lived on a knife's edge of self-destruction for generations, and they had somehow survived. They had developed weapons that could end their entire civilization, and instead of destroying themselves, they had learned to control those weapons while still threatening to use them. They were insane by any reasonable standard, and that insanity made them the most terrifying enemy the Varathi had ever faced. Send a message to High Command, Essex finally ordered. Tell them that I am requesting immediate reinforcements. How many should I request? Essex asked. Essex looked down at the blue planet below, and he remembered the ancient warning from the Galactic archives. Do not open the cage. All of them, he replied. Tell them to send everyone we have, because Essex finally understood the truth. Humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They were not easy prey. They were apex predators who had been locked in a cage with nothing to hunt but each other, and they had spent 200,000 years becoming the most efficient killers in the galaxy. And now, thanks to his invasion, the cage door was wide open. The monsters were awake, and they were hungry. 1 month after the Varathi had landed on Earth, Supreme Commander Essex Vorn received a report that made him question his own sanity. They have done what? A dim and dead Kessex stood before him with trembling hands and a pale complexion that showed how frightened he was to deliver this news. "The humans have captured one of our hyperspace beacons intact," he repeated. "And they have activated it." "That is impossible," Desix said. "It takes centuries to understand hyperspace technology. Their scientists should not even be able to turn it on. Our engineers thought the same thing, Supreme Commander. But the humans did not approach the problem like our scientists would have." The display showed security footage from the captured beacon facility, and Desix watched humans in white coats working alongside soldiers and civilians to disassemble and study the alien technology. They did not try to understand the theory behind the beacon. Kessex explained. They simply experimented until something worked. They call it trial and error, and they consider it a valid scientific method. Desix wanted to argue that this approach was crude and dangerous and should not have succeeded. But the evidence was undeniable. The beacon was active, and that meant the humans now had access to hyperspace travel. "Where are they going?" Desix asked, dreading the answer. "Everywhere." The display shifted to show sensor readings from across the solar system, and Desix counted over 100 human vessels moving toward the hyperspace entry point. The ships were ugly and improvised, built from cargo vessels and passenger aircraft and even what looked like modified submarines. But they were all equipped with Vorathi engines and weapons. "They built a fleet in 4 weeks, Kessex said, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and admiration. 4 weeks. Desix repeated he had seen species take decades to reverse engineer captured technology. And that was with help from the Dominion scientists. The humans had done it alone. "In less than a month. Show me their command structure," he ordered. The display changed to show the organization of what the humans called the United Earth Fleet. And Essex struggled to understand what he was seeing. 190 nations had combined their military forces into a single command structure. And they had done it in less than a week. Species that had been killing each other for generations were now working together with perfect coordination. And their combined fleet was larger than anything Desix had expected. "They stopped fighting each other," he said quietly. "Yes, Supreme Commander, the moment we invaded, every conflict on the planet ended. Nations that had been at war for decades signed peace agreements overnight. They call it the Human Unity Accords." Desix thought about what this meant. The humans had been fighting each other because they had no external enemies worthy of their attention. But now that a real threat had appeared, they had united with terrifying speed. Every weapon and soldier and resource that had been pointed at other humans was now pointed at the Vorathi. "Who is commanding their fleet?" Desix asked. "A human named Admiral Elena Martinez," Kessex replied. "She is 63 years old and has fought in 7 human conflicts. Her psychological profile indicates extremely high intelligence and a complete absence of fear." The display showed an image of Martinez, a small woman with gray hair and hard eyes that reminded Desix of the human prisoner he had interrogated weeks ago. "She has sent a message," Kessex said. "It was broadcast on all frequencies so that our forces would receive it. Play it." The image of Martinez appeared on the main screen, and she spoke with calm confidence to the Vorathi Dominion and anyone else who was listening. She began, "You came to our home. You killed our people. You burned our cities. You thought we were primitive creatures who would surrender and serve you." She paused and smiled, and Desix saw the same cold hunger in her eyes that he had seen in every human he had encountered. "You were wrong. We are coming for you now, and we will not stop until we have shown you what humanity does to those who threaten us. We do not just fight back. We make sure that nothing ever threatens us again. You have an empire that spans 12 galaxies. We have patience and rage and nothing left to lose." The message ended, and the command center was silent. Essex ordered a full analysis of humanity's military capabilities. and the results were delivered to High Command with an urgent warning. The Varathi had conquered 4,000 worlds over millions of years, and they had done so because no species could match their combination of technology and ruthlessness. But the humans were different. They had studied Varathi tactics and found weaknesses that the Dominion had never considered. They had adapted their weapons and strategies with impossible speed, and most importantly, they had a motivation that the Varathi could not match. The Varathi conquered because they wanted more power and resources and glory. The humans were fighting because they were angry. Our psychological experts have analyzed human warfare, the report concluded, and they have identified a pattern that appears throughout their history. When humans feel threatened, they do not simply defend themselves. They pursue and destroy the source of the threat until it can never threaten them again. They hunted their natural predators to extinction. They destroyed competing human subspecies. They eradicate diseases and dangerous animals and anything else that endangers their survival. We are now classified as a threat to human survival. And based on their historical behavior, they will not stop until the Varathi Dominion no longer exists. Essex read the report 3 times before he accepted what it meant. The humans were not content to push the Varathi off their planet. They were coming to destroy the entire Dominion, and the first human boots touched Varathi soil less than 2 weeks later. Reconnaissance team from the United Earth Fleet landed on a Varathi colony world called Desert Prime, and the footage from that landing would be shared across 1,000 worlds within days. The human soldiers did not look scared or nervous as they stepped onto an alien world for the first time in their species' history. They looked excited. One of them, a young man with dark skin and a wide smile, looked up at the purple sky and the twin moons of Desert Prime and spoke words that would echo through history. New worlds to explore, he said. New things to fight. Honestly, we should thank these Varathi guys for showing us the door. The other soldiers laughed. And then they moved out to complete their mission. They returned to their ship 6 hours later with complete intelligence on Varathi defenses. 17 prisoners and 0 casualties. The invasion of Varathi space had begun, and humanity was smiling. 1 year after the Varathi had invaded Earth, the Galactic Council gathered for the first emergency session in 3,000 years. Representatives from 800 species filled the massive chamber at the center of the galaxy, and every single one of them was terrified. The holographic display at the center of the room showed a map of Varathi space, and the damage was clear for everyone to see. 70% of the Dominion had fallen colony after colony had been captured or destroyed by human forces, and the once mighty Varathi military was in complete collapse. But the military losses were not what frightened the council members most. Show them the secondary data. The council chairman ordered. The display shifted to show reports from across Varathi territory, and the representatives watched in horror as the true scope of the human impact became clear. Slave species that had served the Varathi for thousands of years were rising up against their masters. Armed with human weapons and trained in human tactics, worlds that had been conquered and subdued for generations were now flying flags of independence. Inspired by human ideas of freedom and revolution, humans had not just defeated the Varathi military, they had destroyed the entire foundation of the Dominion by spreading the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Hope, the concept they call liberty, has infected 17 species so far, a council analyst explained. And it is spreading faster than any disease we have ever recorded. Once a population is exposed to these ideas, they cannot be suppressed. The chamber erupted in worried whispers as representatives tried to understand what this meant for their own empires and kingdoms. Many of them had slave Populations of their own, many of them ruled through fear and force, and now the humans were teaching the galaxy that fear and force could be overcome. We must unite against them, one representative shouted. Before they come for us as well. But before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened, and a human walked in. She was small compared to most of the beings in the room, barely half the height of the average council member. But she walked with the confidence of someone who feared nothing in the universe. She wore a suit of armor that had obviously been taken from a Varathi warrior, modified to fit her smaller frame, and she carried no visible weapons. She did not need them. The entire galaxy knew what humans were capable of, and no one in the chamber wanted to be the first to challenge her. "My name is Ambassador Sarah Chun," she said, and her voice was calm and pleasant despite the tension in the room. "I am here to represent the United Earth government and the human species." She smiled, and every being in the chamber saw the threat display that hid behind that simple expression. "You have been watching us for a very long time," Chum continued. "Your probes visited our solar system thousands of years ago, and you have been monitoring our development ever since." The council members shifted uncomfortably because they knew this was true. "You classified us as dangerous and recommended quarantine, and you built barriers around our system to keep us contained. You thought you could keep us in our cage forever." She paused and let her words sink in. But then the Varathi opened the door. "And now here we are." She spread her arms wide as if to embrace the entire chamber. "You do not need to be afraid of us," she said. "We are not like the Varathi. We do not want to conquer you, or enslave you, or destroy your civilizations. What do you want?" The chairman Ashton's smile grew wider. "We want to explore," she said. "We want to meet new species and visit new worlds and learn everything this galaxy has to teach us. We have been alone for so long, and now we have a universe full of neighbors to meet. And what about those who oppose you?" Another representative demanded. "What about the Varathi and anyone else who stands in your way?" Chen's eyes grew cold, and for a moment, every being in the chamber saw the predator that lurked behind her friendly expression. "We are very reasonable people," she said. "We prefer peace and cooperation and mutual benefit. But we also have a long memory, and we do not forgive those who hurt us." She let the threat hang in the air for a moment. The Varathi tried to conquer us, and now they are learning the price of that mistake. Anyone else who threatens humanity will receive the same lesson. The chamber fell silent. And then something unexpected happened. An ancient being rose from its seat in the back of the chamber, and every representative turned to look at it with shock. The being was a member of the Architects, a species so old that they were believed to be extinct, and no one had heard them speak in over 1,000,000 years. "We have waited a long time for this moment," the Architect said, and its voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "What do you mean?" the chairman asked. "Humanity was no accident," the Architect explained. "Earth was designed to be a forge, a world of constant challenge and competition that would create the ultimate survivors." The chamber erupted in confused whispers. But the Architect continued. "Long ago, before any of your species existed, our creators faced a threat from beyond the galaxy, a darkness that consumed everything it touched. They could not defeat it, so they created a weapon that would grow stronger with each generation. They created humanity." The Architect turned to face Ambassador Chun. "You were meant to face the darkness when it returns," it said. "You were designed to be the galaxy's protectors, the warriors who would stand against the coming storm." Chun stared at the ancient being for a long moment, and then she laughed. "You designed us to be weapons?" she asked. "You put us through 200,000 years of suffering and conflict because you needed soldiers?" "Yes," the Architect admitted. Chun shook her head and smiled. "Well, I guess it worked," she said, "because if there is one thing humans are good at, it is fighting impossible enemies and winning. She turned back to face the council. So here is my offer to all of you. You can be our enemies, and we both know how that ends. Or you can be our allies, and together we can face whatever is coming. The choice is yours. Across the galaxy. Former Varathi Commander Thesix watched Chen's speech from his cell and felt a strange sense of peace. He had been captured months ago, and he had expected to be executed for his role in the invasion of Earth instead. The humans had kept him alive and treated him with respect, and he had slowly come to understand that they were not the monsters he had feared. They were something far more complex. The next day, a human official came to his cell and offered him a deal. "We need people who understand the galaxy," the official said. "People who can help us navigate the politics and avoid unnecessary conflicts. Will you help us?" Thesix looked at the human's extended hand, and he remembered the first time he had seen that gesture as a greeting. An offer of friendship, a symbol of trust. He took it. "Yes," he said. "I will help you." And so the former enemies became allies, united by a common purpose, because somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something was watching and humanity was ready.